Hello, I'm the real-life fake wizard. On February 25th, 2026, the New York Attorney General Letitia James filed a lawsuit against the Valve Corporation. You know, the company behind Steam, Counter-Strike, Team Fortress 2, Dota 2, and the upcoming Half-Life 3. The lawsuit alleges that Valve's loot box systems in their games constitute illegal gambling, and that Valve has been targeting children and teenagers with these systems to generate billions of dollars in revenue. Now hang on a minute, hold on to that thought for just a moment here. In December of 2025, 2 months before this lawsuit, New York State approved 3 brand new casinos to be built in the downstate region. Each of those casinos' licenses costs $500 million. New York State generated $1.3 billion in tax revenue from mobile sports betting alone in 2025. Their tax rate on mobile sports betting is 51%, the highest in the entire country. New York has lottery billboards on every highway. DraftKings and Fan Duel ads are plastered across every television commercial break. Scratch-off tickets are found inside every bodega and gas station, from Staten Island to Buffalo. But a $2.49 key for a digital knife skin in Counter-Strike, that's where New York State draws the line now. They need to protect the children from being exposed to gambling. Hello, I'm with the government, and we're here to help. Today's indie game shoutout is Pizzapocalypse 2, a 3D platformer with a pizza moveset that's accessible and engaging to all skill levels. Explore different countries and put a stop to the evil corporation that's ruining pizza. To learn more about this and hundreds of other indie games, visit our free indie game discovery network, fakeportal.com, or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the video. This is an extremely important video, and I want to establish my biases and positions going into this because it's important for everything I'm about to say. Firstly, I'm from New York City. I was born and raised there. I know firsthand how corrupt the government is. This isn't a left or right thing. New York is a cesspool of corruption. Next, I believe gambling is terrible. It's genuinely terrible for all people of all ages, not just young people. Gambling addiction destroys lives, destroys families, and preys on the most vulnerable people in society. I also believe loot boxes are terrible too. I'm not a fan of loot boxes, and I've already done an extensive video here detailing how video games use loot boxes to fast-track the youth into gambling addiction. If you haven't watched this video already, please watch it after this one. And that brings us to this legal case. New York State is suing Valve with claims of targeting children and teenagers with gambling. This, however, is disingenuous. New York does not care about saving kids. They care about getting a piece of the big money pie that Valve is making on loot boxes. This lawsuit is the tool they're using to just cut their slice. Now, I also want to say, I'm not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. I'm just a fake wizard. Part 1. What is this lawsuit? The 52-page complaint was filed in Manhattan's New York Supreme Court. It targets Valve's loot box mechanics across 3 games specifically: Counter-Strike 2, Team Fortress 2, and Dota 2. Here's how these systems work if you're not familiar. In Counter-Strike, for example, there are weapon cases. They're essentially digital mystery boxes. You can earn them through gameplay or you can buy them. But to open them, you need a key, and keys cost $2.49 plus tax, so about $2.71 if you're in New York. You open the case, you get a random cosmetic item like a weapon skin. These skins do not affect gameplay, however. They're purely cosmetic, but they do have different rarity tiers, and the rarer ones have real monetary value on Steam's community marketplace and on third-party trading sites. We're talking some items worth tens of thousands of dollars. There was a knife skin that sold for over $1 million in 2024, and in March of 25, the overall Counter-Strike skins market hit a valuation of $4.3 billion. Now, New York's argument is that this system meets the legal definition for gambling under state law, and for something to be gambling in New York, you need 3 things: consideration, which means you paid something for like the key; chance, meaning the outcome is random, in this case it is, and prize, meaning you receive something of value that can be converted to money. AG Letitia James is arguing that because these skins can be resold on the Steam marketplace, where Valve takes a 15% cut, by the way, or on third-party sites for actual cash, they qualify as prizes, and therefore, the whole system is essentially an unregulated slot machine aimed at kids. They're citing the state constitution, which bans unauthorized lotteries and gambling. They're citing penal law for promoting gambling in the second degree, which is a misdemeanor, and first degree, which is a felony for high-volume operations. They want injunctions. They want Valve to cough up the profits, and they want triple fines. AG James put out a statement saying, quote, "Valve has made billions letting children illegally gamble. These features are addictive, harmful, and illegal." Okay? Let's address that. Section 2, why this case is weak. Multiple legal experts, not me, I'm a fake wizard, have already weighed in on this, and the consensus is not favorable for New York. The biggest problem with the state's argument is that players always receive something. You pay for a key, you open a case, you get a skin. You might not get a good skin, you might get a skin worth 3 cents, but you get something. That's fundamentally different from a slot machine where you can put money in and get literally nothing back. This distinction matters enormously in court. There's a long list of cases where similar arguments have already been tried and failed. In 2023, My versus Supercell was dismissed in Northern California. The court said virtual items aren't a, quote, thing of value because the terms of service prohibit cash transfers and secondary market resale doesn't create gambling. Taylor versus Apple, same year, same district, dismissed. Mason versus Machine Zone in 2017, no gambling found. Phillips versus Double Down in 2016, dismissed. The pattern here is now consistent. Legal analyst Jonathan Loiterman from the Foundation Law Group has said that because players always get an item, the quote-unquote bet analogy falls apart. Longtime friend of the channel and Dungeons & Dragons player Richard Hogue from Hogue Law compared loot boxes to Pokemon cards, which is actually a really useful comparison. When you buy a pack of Pokemon cards, you might get a rare holographic card worth hundreds of dollars, or you might get a bunch of commons worth almost nothing. The outcome is random, and there's a secondary market. Nobody is suing the Pokemon company for running an illegal casino out of a Target. And courts have consistently said they're not going to expand gambling laws without new legislation. Hogue went further and called this case, quote, weak and primarily political. And here's the thing, Valve has a built-in defense that most people overlook. You can earn loot box drops for free just by playing the game. If there's no payment, there's no consideration. If there's no consideration, there's no gambling. Not every case opening involves a purchased key. All of these examples poke holes in the legal case of New York State and what they're doing. Now let's pause everything, time out. Just because we can poke holes in the legal case of New York State, does this mean loot boxes are great and wonderful and good for our society? No, they're not. I think the mechanics are manipulative. The animated spins and near misses, the rarity tiers, this is all designed to get you to keep spending. I personally think Pokemon cards are gambling too. I am not sitting here saying this is all fine. It's not. What I am saying is that the legal foundation for this particular lawsuit is shaky, and if a guy with no legal experience, dressed as a fake wizard here, can do a little research that can ruin this case for New York, we have to ask the question, why is New York really doing this? Section 3, New York's gambling empire. This is where it gets ugly, folks, and real. This is where it gets very ugly and very real. New York's constitution technically bans gambling, Article 1, Section 9, except for all the exceptions they've carved out over the last 60 years. Lotteries got authorized in 1966. Horse racing has been around forever. And then in 2013, they amended the Constitution to allow up to 7 casinos. From there, and since then, the floodgates have opened. 4 upstate commercial casinos were built and opened between 2016 and 2018. Video lottery terminals were expanded at racetracks. And then in 2021, the state authorized mobile sports betting, which launched in January 2022 with 9 different operators. Now let's follow the money. New York's overall gaming tax revenue went from $2.8 billion in fiscal year 2011 to 2012, all the way up to $4.8 billion by 2022-2023. That's a 69.5% increase. And think about it. New York State created more pipelines in the funnel to allow people to gamble. All those expansion points. That near 70% increase was from the state deliberately creating new ways for people to gamble. Why? So they could collect more taxes. Mobile sports betting alone generated $727 million in state taxes in fiscal year 2022 to 2023, which more than doubled what they originally projected. By 2025, it hit $1.32 billion, $26 billion in total bets placed. And the state takes 51% off the top from the operators. Again, this is the highest tax rate in the country, and they are not done yet. December 2025, again, 2 months before suing Valve, the state advanced 3 new downstate casino licenses, $500 million per license. They're also pushing online casino bills in 2026 with a proposed 30.5% tax rate. The state wants more gambling because it creates more revenue, therefore more access for more people to place more bets. So when Letitia James stands at a podium and says Valve is running an illegal gambling operation that harms children, that is not at all the full picture. The state she represents has spent the better part of a decade systematically expanding gambling at every level. They have turned gambling into one of the most significant revenue streams in the state budget. And 95% of gambling revenue is earmarked for education. It's going towards helping the children, which sounds noble until you realize what it actually means. The state has made its education funding dependent on people gambling, which means they need people to keep gambling, which means they need gambling to expand, which means they will never, ever meaningfully restrict it. New York has soul-bound the education system to gambling taxes. You hear that, buckaroos? Gambling your kid's college fund pays for other kids to go to school. We live in a clown world. Section 4, the people they claim to protect. I don't think you can talk about gambling properly without talking about who gambling and gambling addiction actually harms. And because if New York actually cared about gambling addiction, the evidence of its impact is sitting right there in their own data. After mobile sports betting launched in 2022, calls to the state's Hope Line, which is New York's addiction hotline, increased by 26% in 1 year. And that's just New York. Nationally, gambling is also a serious problem, with helpline calls around the country increasing 150% between 2019 and 2023. Studies have shown that low-income households spend 4.5% or more of their income on gambling. Wealthier households spend around 1%. Gambling is regressive. It takes the most from the people who can afford it the least. Research also shows that early exposure to gambling quadruples the risk of developing a gambling addiction later in life. So when we talk about protecting kids, the question is, what is the state, or the country really, doing about the forms of gambling it actually controls? And we don't even have time in this video to talk about how loot boxes are specifically there to, what is that? Condition children into a digital economy. And later on, we found out loot boxes basically fast-track kids into gambling addicts. New York allocated $9.6 million to problem gambling services in fiscal year 2022 to 23. But that's $9.6 million against $4.8 billion in revenue. That's less than 1%. The mobile betting tax specifically funnels $6 million annually to addiction services. Again, that's $6 million out of $1.3 billion collected. What is this, a rounding error? Governor Hochul signed some ad warning mandates in October 2024, requiring gambling ads to include addiction disclaimers, similar to cigarettes. She banned targeting ads on college campuses, but is that really enough? Or does it do anything at all? When you approve 3 new casinos 2 months later while simultaneously suing a video game company for loot boxes, I don't know, folks, the messaging gets a little confusing. There are researchers and advocates who have called for dedicating 3% of gambling revenue to addiction prevention and treatment. That would be roughly $144 million based on current revenues. The state spends less than a tenth of that as of right now, because spending more on fixing the problem would be an admission that the problem exists, and admitting the problem exists would make it harder to keep expanding the thing that causes the problem. And this is not just a New York problem, this is a nationwide gambling epidemic. Section 5. So who is Letitia James? Letitia James was elected Attorney General of New York in 2018, and she has built her entire reputation on going after large, wealthy targets. And sure, some of those targets might have deserved it. I would never claim to know them all, nor could I claim that every lawsuit she's filed is frivolous. Of course, I couldn't prove that. But there is a pattern with her, and the pattern seems to be find a deep-pocketed defendant, file an aggressive lawsuit, generate headlines, and then settle for a large payout before it ever goes to trial. Over 70% of her major cases have settled pre-trial. For instance, DoorDash settled for $16.75 million over misleading tips. Predatory lenders settled for $1 billion in canceled debts. The Trump organization was hit with a $354 million judgment, and these are billion-dollar targets. Valve's estimated valuation is over $10 billion. Steam has 132 million monthly active users. The Counter-Strike skin market alone is $4.3 billion. From a pure shakedown perspective, this is like Wile E. Coyote seeing the Roadrunner. But yeah, there's a playbook here, and here's what it is. File aggressively, publicize the harms, invoke children, and wait for the defendant to calculate that settling is cheaper than fighting it. It doesn't matter if this case would survive a trial. What matters is if the pressure is enough to extract a big payout. And gamers online have been saying exactly this. People are calling it a money grab, a shakedown, a coordinated play to either extract settlement money or pressure Valve into operational concessions that benefit the state. Valve hasn't responded publicly as of this recording, which tells you something. When you've got good lawyers and bad case law working against your opponent, sometimes the best strategy is silence. Section 6, the real hypocrisy. Let's combine again all of the facts about New York to put things really in perspective, just for funsies here. New York State runs the lottery. The lottery is a gambling product. It is marketed aggressively across the entire state. Billboards, television ads, bodega point-of-sale displays, scratch-off tickets, all designed with bright colors and exciting themes to encourage impulse purchases. These are scientifically backed marketing tactics. The odds of winning a major lottery jackpot are astronomically worse than the odds of getting a rare knife skin in Counter-Strike. And you know what you get when you lose the lottery? Nothing. You get a piece of trash paper. At least with a loot box, to my chagrin, you get a digital item. New York authorized mobile sports betting. You can place a bet on your phone from your couch at 2 a.m. while your family is asleep. The convenience and privacy of mobile gambling is one of the primary drivers of addiction, according to the studies that New York's own agencies cite. They know this, and yet they launched it anyway. They collect 51 cents of every dollar the operators earn. And New York is actively building 3 new casinos. And then Letitia James files a lawsuit against a video game company, one that operates outside of New York, by the way, that the state collects no gambling tax revenue from, whose loot box system has been repeatedly found by courts to not constitute gambling. And she says she's doing this all to protect children. This is not about protecting children. If it were about protecting children, you'd be restricting the gambling operations you actually control. You'd be spending more than 1% of gambling revenue on addiction services. You'd be banning DraftKings ads during football games that kids watch. Heck, you might be banning DraftKings entirely because of the problems it's been creating for you. You'd be addressing the 26% spike in addiction hotline calls that your own mobile betting expansion caused, but you're not doing any of that because those gambling operations pay you. And Valve, at least right now, doesn't. And for years and years, governments, corporations, and decision makers around the world have viewed video games as childlike playthings for kids. They don't actually take gaming seriously. We keep seeing this in the media. So when an attorney general in New York finds out just how much money is tied up in these digital children's toys and is hidden inside a massive private company, I can't say I'm surprised that Valve is getting sued. Section 7. What happens next? Realistically, here's what's going to happen next. Valve either ignores this, fights it with the mountain of precedent on their side, or offers some minor concession to make the suit go away without setting any kind of legal precedent. They might geo-block loot box features in New York, which would affect maybe 8% of the user base, but they're not going to lose sleep over this. The lawsuit will generate headlines for James. It'll give her another talking point about protecting kids and consumers. Whether or not it goes anywhere legally is almost besides the point. The point was the announcement. This is 100% lawfare. If this case somehow succeeds, and legal experts don't think it actually will, it could theoretically halt loot boxes in New York and create pressure for similar actions in other states. Countries like Belgium have already banned loot boxes, but the US legal landscape is very different and has lobbyists that don't want it to end. And without federal legislation, individual state lawsuits are going to keep running into the same precedent wall. I think in closing, I just want to restate again, I don't like loot boxes. I think they are gambling. I think the industry should do better. They won't, but they should. And I wish the governments would do better too, but God knows they won't. Every time a politician brings forward some legislation to dismantle or rein in the loot box infrastructure, the legislation propositions don't get very far at all because they're crap. And I also don't like being lied to. And when New York State tells me this lawsuit is about protecting people while simultaneously running one of the most aggressive gambling expansion programs in the country, I know I'm being lied to. And now, so do you too. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well, and for the love of God, cancel Disney+.